Joining us today is Kevin Mulcahy. He's an S&C and Gaelic football coach and owner of TMC Performance Coaching. He's over 30 years coaching experience across a wide range of sports from underage to professional levels. Cheers for coming on today, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. It's great to be on.
The big thing we want to talk about today is S&C in relation to the new rules. I suppose, first of all, before we get into all that, as someone who's been involved with Gaelic football for a long time, what are your thoughts on the new rules coming in for next season?
Mixed, really, right? To be honest, I don't think we can predict too much yet, really. There's so many rules. I think they've gone about it. I personally disagree with the approach, right? Now, I understand the constraints that they originally were under for time. It just seems a bit panicked and a bit too many rules at once, right? But it is what it is, and I was happy for the progression and to try stuff. So I've kind of moved on personally from this is a bit too much to just actually getting into it and getting ready for next year, which there is a bit of excitement with, There's new things to try. And I just think we have to be, I don't want to be overly cautious. We have to try and enjoy it, but I'm not going to do too much too early in my coaching, to be honest, because we just play the game as much as you can with training, depending on the numbers you have, or play friendlies, etc. I don't think we know what's going to emerge. And talking to the few people who've been involved in the games already, let's say challenge game, at county or similar levels, there's some things emerging and some things are not, and that's just the nature of it. So it's going to take a good while. And then if, like, say, at the end of the league and the inter-county level, they make a change, like some of these changes could be quite dramatic if you withdraw, say, the back pass to the goalkeeper completely, which is a possibility. That's a big change, and it might seem like a small thing, right? But you fundamentally change the game if you do that, right? And that could be a positive. I'm not saying it's not. So I'm a little bit cautious while I'm still doing the research and looking at things, what's going to be important and what the challenges are going to be. And I suppose we just got to get on with it now and see what emerges, and hopefully they are allowed to make sensible changes before next year's championships start, and go from there.
Yeah, because there's not enough data really to go off from the rules. Like, we've only seen the Interpros games and other little tournaments that have been going on, and some inter-county teams are obviously back with playing challenge games and things like that. So there's not a huge amount to go off. People will be aware of the rules by now, but just to run back over them. So we have the 7 core enhancements are the big ones we're going to talk about today. We've the 1v1 throw in to start the game, kick-out's going beyond the 40-metre arc, the no back pass to the keeper inside his own half, solo and goal restarts. Teams must keep 3v3 inside each half. A small change to the advanced mark where they can play on for an advantage before it's called back if needed, and then the 2-point scoring arc. From an S&C standpoint, are there any major implications there jumping out from those initial 7 core enhancements that you think will have an impact in terms of the S&C, the physical side of the game?
Yeah, massive. And they mightn't be that obvious at the start. Even again, I've seen a bit of data on GPS from the Interpros, and I've seen a bit of data from recent games, right, where a college played an inter-county team in a friendly. And one of the things that people have said, the volume of running doesn't seem to be any higher. And that is true, okay, from the data I've seen. The overall volume, but that can fool us, right? The phases of play are shorter by 5 to 15 seconds, okay? So what that means is we're going to have more phases, which probably means less recovery, okay? So less recovery from an explosive burst is underpinned by our aerobic system, okay? So the elite Gaelic footballers, you'd probably be aware, Kevin, of the anaerobic speed reserve as a way of kind of analysing what type of athlete someone is, right? So they tend to be explosive, fast twitch, Sean Powter, Jack McCaffrey types. Jack Barry would be a good at the other end of the scale, who's a real endurance guy, not necessarily that explosive, but can absolutely stay running all day. But most people who make senior club and higher levels of Gaelic football will be kind of hybrids in between the two. The nature of Gaelic football will actually, if you kept playing it from a young age, will probably make you a hybrid athlete anyway, okay? So the high-end hybrid, the fast hybrid, is the guy who plays intercounty, the James McCarthy's. He's an exact version of that, okay? So their aerobic systems will be attuned to where they are now, and they would be very impressive aerobic systems. You explode, you recover, okay? The speed of your recovery is underpinned by your aerobic system, okay? What I'm already hearing from some of the preparation of intercounty teams, right, in at least 2 cases, is they're attempting to do more of the hard explosive stuff and build up volume of that, as opposed to improving the more aerobic system. Okay. And I think that might lead to injuries. That's a hunch at the moment. And the actual playing of the game, if you have less time to recover, I would be interested in the heart rate, if they're tracking heart rates. Our lads staying, I suspect they have to be based on the little bit. It's a small sample still. That interprovincial game I got that on, and the challenge game I got that on, right? Is they're staying in a heightened heart rate, I would assume, for longer, okay? So I think, having seen that, and based on the way I think the rules might bring us, it's going to be a little bit more a higher heart rate game and a little bit more like basketball in that sense, and on a Gaelic football pitch. And I think tactically that's going to play out some way similarly as well, right? So building an aerobic system is the absolute priority for me, okay? And I look at that from the high end and the low end, let's say. The base, slower, what people might consider zone 2 type training these days, as one approach. And I think players are going to have to do a little bit of that in the more restorative sense, particularly the high end and senior club players who are taking it seriously, whether, at different times of the year, that after big events and games that they start restoring their body straight away so that they're ready for Tuesday or Wednesday night again. But they're also going to have to build the capacity. And then they're going to have to build the red zone capacity as well, like the VO2 max kind of running stuff. I think even more of that. And that might mean that coaches and S&C coaches are going to have to work even more in tune, right? If you're lucky enough to have that at club level, a coach and an S&C, and certainly at county level, where the coach is going to have to nail the gameplay, right? And that's going to have to produce, for me in a way, a lot of what the, say, interval mass running did before. Okay? And I think there's still a place for that, and tempo running and a few things like that absolutely. But I think teams are really going to have to put in time to finish training sessions, probably, right, to build the capacity with maybe 1 day or 2 days of VO2, hard stuff, right? And they're going to have to be very tactical about what time of the week they put it in. And then some base kind of zone 2 type training, easy training as well, both as a restorative approach and as a capacity builder.
So you're saying basically a lot of players will wear GPSs during games, even at club level if the club don't have them. But are you saying that the overall distance they cover in a game will be relatively similar, but it's the high speed running side of things that is going to increase significantly?
It's possible the high speed running may not increase in volume either. So you might have shorter runs, but more of them. I think it's just that you're going to have less recovery. I assume there's going to be a lot of very fast kickouts. Like, the whole thing is intertwined. Tactically, our goalie is going to go hard and fast to get out on 5 seconds, get a ball away over the top, maybe long. The team I'm involved with, I'll give you an example. Like, we probably only have one tall target, right? So we're going to have to adjust to that. Probably a lot of it is get it out fast, over the top to our runners. We have a lot of very fast players, right? Or 4 or 5 exceptionally athletic kind of speedsters. If that's shut down, right, but that's all very, very fast play. So fellas psychologically going to be tuned in as well to the teams that play against us and vice versa. And they're just after making a lung bursting transition run to try and score a goal or kick a score, and it's gone dead. The keeper can beat them out. He doesn't have to wait for them to get back out. So I just think the whole heart rate stuff is going to be a better indication of what's going on in a new sense than necessarily KMs. So I'm always a bit wary of a volume of KMs anyway, right? Volume is a dodgy barometer that I think, let's say, the lay person, for want of a better description, the armchair supporter, or the people who watch it, we've been drenched with like Sky Sports, and they started delivering the volume. Look how many kilometers this guy ran, and of course some of it is very impressive, but it doesn't tell the story, and I think even less now, the high speed running may not actually tell us the story yet that we need to know and observe as S&C coaches in particular, and physios, and I think the football coach. So the football coach is really going to have to be attuned and willing to listen, and maybe adjust their practices, their game design, and all that kind of stuff to bring players in a layered fashion up to not having as much recovery. I think that's, whether you create phases of play, repetitive plays, that's and layer that up. We do 5 sets this week defensively on Tuesday night. We do 5 attacking versions, transitions on Friday night, and then we try and layer that up and see where we are. Whatever, people will have their own approaches and methods to that kind of stuff. So I think the heart rate monitoring would be interesting for me. I haven't seen anything that indicates heart rates at the moment, but we just have to be careful of the running and thinking that, because some of it seems to look quite similar to the old game. But I don't think it's going to be the old game in that sense.
So Jim McGuinness was talking a couple of weeks ago, and just to read out a quote, he said the game's going to speed up a multiple of what it was. The middle eight will be under a lot of pressure to finish games. You're going to have a certain type of athlete as well as a footballer. It's going to be very challenging and demanding. And Neil Gallagher, the former Donegal midfielder, said as well, it looks like it's going to push players even further in terms of fitness and the rate at which they're going to be asked to cover ground. Just in terms of that middle eight, is the workload going to be different than the current game? I
think so. Yeah. I'd be lying if I told you exactly, just like the lads are indicating there. And coming from a professional point of view, I couldn't nail it down yet either. But my feeling is absolutely like you're going to have to get. And funnily enough, one of the byproducts of this is people might not get the kicking footballers that they think they're going to get. Yeah. Right? I absolutely think, particularly in big, say, urban clubs and whatnot, who some less skilled guys are going to start making teams now because they can just run. I'd be looking at certain players from other sports if I was, soccer players who used to play a bit of GA before, I'd be going back looking for some of them if they're interested in playing football again. Soccer players tend to have the biggest aerobic engines. So guys with a lot of let's say experience in that. The ideal Gaelic footballer really has grown up playing basketball and soccer as well, from a conditioning point of view, like a natural and probably a skill and decision making point of view as well. But you're going to have to load. And look, one of the major positives I think that'll come out of this is a role players. We might see a return to certain types of players that may be lost out in the old game, because maybe the 3v3, I have a feeling that a traditional centre-back who can play ball, maybe it has to be physical, hard tackler, whatever, I think we'll see a return of them. Good defender, but can kick, doesn't necessarily have to be up and down and an awesome athlete, right? I also think the Brian McGuigan type, number 11, I think there's a place for them in the middle eight. And you can probably carry one player because I think the creativity, the ability to unlock defenses, there will be a little bit more space. And I think also the 13 or 15 old school jinky guy, I would have given up on the thoughts of Gooch coming through if he had come through now, right? I'm not sure he would, but I would reverse my view now based on these rules that there is room for at least one of those players up top. So I see them as those guys are going to have to be at the higher levels. They're still going to have to be at a certain level. You need a certain genetic and conditioning ticket to play at the highest level, right? But I certainly think we'll see a jump back to this at club level where and possibly again at the higher level if they do have a certain level of genetics, that we'll see those players emerge, and that'll be an interesting part of it, I think. But I think you're going to need 7 guys in really great shape, and to answer your question the long way around, and 3 subs minimum, who you feel. And again, they could be older players or maybe less explosive players, but they have 10, 15, 20 minutes in them. So tactically, I think substitutions are even more important, and they had got very important in the last 10 years, but I think they're even more important now.
And say if you were involved now with an inter-county team or even a high-level club team, you touched on a few things earlier around, say, like tempo running, mass running, even zone 2 conditioning, things like that. How would you be laying out the S&C over the first couple of months of pre-season, maybe to get ready for the start of competition? Does it change much from what you originally would have done?
No, I'd say my approach in higher principles would be quite similar, actually. But I definitely think we'd have to up the volume. And I would definitely think I'd probably add more transition games, conditioning transition games. Conditioning games or small-sided games, whatever you want to call them, kind of medium-sized games, really. 6v6s to 8v8s, that kind of crack, where there's a fast transition. Let's say you get a score, you actually keep the ball and transition back the other way. That kind of stuff. That I don't think you can. So I would definitely do at least a 12, maybe a 16 session cycle of VO2 running. So maybe build up from, I might start with our very early stages, 2 minutes on, 1 minute off at your 100% mass, right? And build up to 4/4s if you can, right? It depends on the level, and you may have to pull the brakes. Let's say if you have a high injury profile, or you're trying to get guys back in condition. Not really a problem these days anymore, but that would be the target. That you build their VO2 to 3 sets of 3 minutes anyway as a basic, right? 3 on, 3 off, then 3 on, 2 off, right? And stay in that. That's going to get the heart rate over 90, 95%, and they're going to, and that just works. There is no getting away from it. It's hard, but it's very, very useful. I would then probably do 2 of them a week over a period of time. Obviously, I'm saying 12, 16 sessions. Probably depends as a dual, how much access do I have, all that kind of stuff. But let's say I have the run of it and it's just a football team, I would take 4 weeks minimum to do that. And then I would change the VO2 running. I would do some tempo running, because I just think that extensive at the start, run 100 at 70%, walk back, right? Good for introducing the high speed running, learning to recover. I think intensive tempos and even shorter recoveries, that would be part of the conditioning. I'm going to add a little layer to this year, I'd say, right? So that, I might have worked from 3 sets of 3 intensive where you run 100, walk 50, 3 reps by 3 sets, either in a block or throughout a training session, depending on the access I had or what the relationship with the hurling or football coach was. And I'd work them up to 3 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 3, right? I'm going to shorten those recoveries, right? So that's something I'm going to play with in the coming season. And then I think the other part is the repeat sprint work. So I would introduce that earlier probably than I would have before, maybe week 5. And I've taken a new approach actually from the basketball girls. It's not a new approach. I would have introduced some of it in the traditional repeat sprint sense with teams always, basically. But I'm going to another volume-based repeat sprint approach, which would be like 6 seconds all out, 24 walk, and build for volume. Like, can we do 12 reps, 15 reps, 18 reps? And literally, I'd say 24 is my kind of target in my head. If I could get a lot of the team to that level safely, that would be a good target, and players kind of like that stuff as well, which is a help. Definitely. So 3 modes. I know I have a lot of talk there now, but like the VO2, the distance kind of volume stuff, the tempo running to get the system changing from high to low, and the repeat sprint then for the small game, the short game, the ability to repeat.
Yeah, no, I think that all makes sense. And that probably feeds into the injury side of things as well. Like you've touched on it a couple of times, but there's a danger that teams are probably going to go too hard too early as well to go after this. And then there's obviously an increased risk of players breaking down early in the season if they're trying to do too much too soon in terms of reducing recovery times and things that you touched on already there.
Yeah. Yeah, like this is where you have to cut your cloth. Like, I mean, a team, I mean, you gave me, I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but you finished up relatively recently, you know, and you have a new management coming in next year. Like, this is one of the areas I've seen over the years where it can be catastrophic because management want to put in not make a statement per se, but put their stamp on something and get fellas up to a certain level. But, you know, we know that like somewhere between 25 and 40 days, you're staying at 90% of your aerobic conditioning, right? So do we need to go bananas in the new year with say that particular team who've been playing to 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? You know, so you have to cut your cloth. Now, if they've been out of championship since, say, late August, which some teams in Cork might be, for instance, or then that's a slightly different thing, you know, and you got to cut your cloth there. So absolutely, I know for a fact already that two county teams I've had some insight into, they're going after it hard and fast, and I think it's going to end in tears. So you do have to be careful of how you build it up. Like test them. Where were we last year? What information do we have? Like, what is the capacity of these players in a broad sense, and then in the groups, I would break them into their groups of endurance profile, hybrid profile, and speed profile, right? And yeah, so like that is the challenge. But again, it's very much so at county level. Like, you really need to be working with your game conditioning is really important as well. Those just little nuances, that little extra chase for the ball, you know, some of it might be shorter. How explosive like players need to adapt to that. So I would be playing the actual game, particularly if you've 30 players of training in DB. I'd be playing 6-minute games of 6 and 8 minute games of the actual game with a referee and doing the new rules, because that is a conditioning element as well. And we cannot forget about that. I think that's a huge part. Like, I don't even know what's changed. Like, I've never been on the side of a pitch where these rules have been implemented, to be honest, right? I watched one game, have data from 2 games, whatever. I've talked a lot about it. But there'll be things I'll see the first time I see it that I go, oh, Jesus, that's changed. And so will other people. And I will look at it from my skill acquisition S&C lens. Another coach will look at it from, and he could be a brilliant coach, by the way, will look at it from his ex-player. I was a corner forward lens, right? And people come in with their different lenses. So I think the coaches getting together and having good, honest chats. But for everybody, from the S&C coach to the manager to the head coach, an open mind is crucial. We're going to have to look at the game and see what happens first in a lot of ways while doing your base level training. But as I said, players are conditioned these days. I think some teams are doing too heavy pre-seasons that are unnecessary, because there's not lads coming back totally out of shape anymore, you know. And if they are, they're not making the team.
Like, skill acquisition is obviously a big part of what you do as well. The solo and go is probably one aspect where things will need to change in terms of how teams are working on skills and training and stuff like that. There will be a lot of coaches who will listen to this as well. Are there any game-based scenarios that they can do in training, or different drills and things that can help players develop that aspect of something that wouldn't really come naturally to them now?
Yeah.
Is going to be a huge part of the game, and it's going to be teams and players that can take advantage of that will really make hay for this rule in particular.
Yeah, the solo and go, it's something I'm going to go after myself, I can tell you, because of the type of team that I'm with. It could be a huge advantage to us, right? The cynical delayed play didn't suit us, right? And arguably we weren't cynical enough ourselves, you know. But incentivize in training. Okay. So a very simple thing for a coach to do with a solo and go is you could incentivize or decentivize, and coaches can make up their mind on this. One, if you really want to encourage it like hardcore, you could say, if you don't solo and go, it's a turnover, right? That's a hard constraint now. I'm not, but if it's really not happening, that's something you could do just to get lads into the, really think about it, right? But probably incentivizing is the better approach where, right, lads, if we score off a solo and go in this game, whether you're playing a full game or a 5v5, it's worth double, right? And even in the internal competitiveness that most footballers have, and I think really like the young lads love that stuff. Like particularly if you're dealing with 16s, minors and stuff, like they eat into that, anything that creates competition. And I think, to be honest, more and more of the players now that have come through are used to that type of training and coaching that's a bit more game based and using constraints and tailoring games for different ways. So I think incentivize anything you want to do. Like I would have incentivized left-sided scoring in training, right? To deliberately, and I did a lot of it, to increase, one, getting our left-sided players on the ball who are harder to defend, right? So we're not forgetting about them. And two, to reward guys who are right-footed and willing to have a shot, okay? And that's one way. Then say the little chip pickup rather than bending down, okay? Again, that was something I introduced. If we do that, right, and sometimes they totally forgot about it, okay? And I would put it into every game in a training session or keep going back to it maybe over a couple of weeks. If you chip pick the score in the play, any play, it's worth double, right? And you can't force these skills, okay, too much. You just got to introduce some kind of incentive that there's a reward for doing it, okay? And once someone sees it, and once someone does it, you're starting the motor behave change then. And that solo and go is a massive change. I think it's underestimated. Again, just talking to the one person the most recent game that I had a chat with someone about, there was no solo and go. Not one.
Right.
So, and I'm not that surprised by that. I'm a little surprised that there was zero, because there's usually some fella really tuned in. But he said no solo and go. Okay. So I think it's a weapon. Absolutely. I think that will improve the game. I think, to be honest, the discipline rules would have improved the game without any other tinkering, or at least we could have gone with the discipline, because cynical play was absolutely the main problem. We weren't encouraged to go forward, not helped by referees. And I coached cynical play, right? Because they were the rules of engagement, right? Stand in his way, get them to pass the ball. Like I would have had a KPI that if we get the team to pass the ball backwards twice in a transition, we lose the ball, say kick it into or turned over in the halfway, they'll never score, right?
Right, yeah.
They'll never score. If they pass it back twice, we're back, right? Absolutely no chance of scoring a goal unless we have a meltdown. They might get a point, right? But we're reducing they're probably at club level going to give us the ball back. Okay? Now that's a very negative way of coaching when you think about it. Right? We want them to pass, if they pass it back once, that's 5 meters back running. 25 meters back running, 5 seconds. Most players will get back 25 meters. If most of my defensive setup gets back 25 meters, if we get back 50 meters, it's all over. Right? And I don't think some of that stuff will change, to be honest, right? But whereas what might change it is that, 50-meter rule and the solo and go is an element to that as well, that, you got to get out of the way. And whoever nails that early, you could see a team like, I actually would have thought Armagh were one of them and they went to won the All-Ireland last year, but someone like Armagh, let's say, could be very successful this year, maybe going from a rank of 8 or 9, maybe people might not see them as, someone like Mayo with their athleticism. Like if they nail this, right, their slightly lower level of, I say, top level scoring
Yeah.
compared to like, your Kerrys and your and those types, or might actually push them over the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Donegal are another team, I think, with the type of Donegal have 9 or 10 wing backs.
Yeah.
They've all these guys who are really good footballers, 5'9" to 6 foot, who can keep going up and down, and they've produced a few kickers now as well. If they nail that, they become big contenders as well. And that is the same then in club level. So physical size, as you know, Kevin, at senior football level in any county, the top 4 or 5 teams, there is a serious physicality about them all, right? I wonder, is that reduced a little bit, and in a positive sense? That would be the one thing I'm hoping for a little bit. And I like physicality, don't get me wrong, but that pure size, like small players, might have a better chance going forward.
Yeah, okay, that's all really interesting. Yeah. And just touching on Donegal, I'm sure that's exactly, they're in Dubai at the moment on a training camp. I'm sure they're absolutely hammering it all this stuff right now.
Yeah,
and they'll have it all nailed by the time they come back. Just a final topic I want to touch on, Kevin, because you've been great with your time. I just want to talk about off-season training and pre-season training and what players are doing individually at the moment, or what they should be doing. Like I know I saw you tweeted recently about you still think there's too much weightlifting and bodybuilding that players are focusing on in the off season, and I think it has moved away from that in the last 10 years. But there probably is still too much of a focus on trying to improve, say, your max bench or your max deadlift, or trying to put on size when it's not really relevant to going onto the pitch. So, what are your thoughts on that? Like, is there still not enough speed and power training the players are doing? Are they not getting onto the pitch enough themselves to get some max sprints in or stuff like that? What kind of stuff should they be doing that they're not doing from what you're seeing, talking to guys and seeing them in the gym?
So get on the pitch and sprint, right?
Yeah.
Once a week, I think, in the off season, put it as part as maybe do a warm up. Ideally, and so many clubs have now, right? There's not too many excuses you can have these days. They have a pitch beside the gym. Most teams. Do a warm up, go out, do some plyos, maybe some bounding, right? That explosive stuff. You don't have to go bananas. Keep it extensive, easy-ish, right? But just that you're putting force through the hamstrings and quads as you're leaping and landing, and that's, you don't need to do huge volumes of it, and you don't have to do it at max explosion. But it's just going to keep the length of your hamstrings and quads, and the application of force, and the absorbing of the ground and all that stuff. And then, build up 10, 20, 30 meter sprints and a few tempos, and go in and do push, pull, squat, hinge, right? Yeah. Maybe one of the exercises, you could do that once a week, twice a week, add in a bit of extra strength work. A second day, go for a heavy deadlift in 3 to 5 sets one day. The other day, do a back squat. Maintaining muscle and strength is important, but it's not bodybuilding, and they can keep an eye on their weight. And one of the simplest formulas ever is like, it mightn't be easy for every fella to check what speed they're at, but if they are wearing GPS, or they have speed gates because an S&C coach is involved with them, or whatever, right? Like, it's a very simple formula, momentum. Am I able to stay at the same speed at the weight I'm at? So if I go from 80 kg to 83 kg, well, and I can maintain my volume of running in a match, and I'm still at 8.8 meters per second top speed, well, then I'm okay, right? I'm able to carry it, and that does make me a more explosive player. So the momentum formula means, like, my momentum is better. If I run into someone, I'm at the same speed, and I'm now 83 kg versus 80. That's grand. So that's a very relatively simple. It's not easy to find your max speed all the time. Like, you can do it off cameras. There's cheap apps out there now. So if someone's really into it and wants to watch, some players, of course, they're young or whatever, or they lose weight easily. But I feel they're the minority, and they need a bit of extra weight training. Absolutely. That's fine, but it should be done incrementally over a couple of years. and not do it too fast, because again, like, you run for full speed. I mean, everything goes out the window when we play a game, or even if you play five-a-side soccer during the winter. Do you know?
Yeah.
Everything goes out the window. You've done a load of weightlifting. You've put on 3 or 5 kg of muscle. Yeah, you look great, and then you pull your tear Achilles tendon in five-a-side soccer because it's on Astro. You haven't played on Astro in 6 weeks or whatever, a year maybe, and you're heavier, and you think you can change direction the same way you did 8 weeks ago, but that's not actually the case, you know. So it's just being a bit wary of that. That's the silly stuff that happens. But strength is not necessarily. I think we're fooled by size a little bit still, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, no, I would say even Armagh, right? Armagh are a great example. There's nobody carrying excessive muscle there, from what I could see. Brilliantly conditioned, right? And the Dubs are the same, you know, the great Dublin team. And I'd say they even have to get 1 to 3 kg lighter now. Certainly those middle eight players, right? Because it's physics, right? We're going to have less recovery, so carrying that little bit less weight might be desirable. It's a running game. There's certain rules. It might not be as physical. As I said, I don't really know, right? It'll be physical in some ways, but I can see it being a more athletic game. So carrying 78 kg as opposed to 80 kg could actually be advantageous come the end of games, or in terms of your own personal injury profile, where you're not getting that ability to recover as we spoke about at the start of the game. And we know that, like, not only the timing of injuries being just before halftime and at the end of games, all evidence in all sports points to that, but that it's in times of fatigue we get injured, right? You know, or instability. You know, like I like, you know, the ACL goes because I'm in the air and I land at a very funny position. You know what I mean? We're either unstable or we're fatigued, or maybe both, right? And this new game is probably going to destabilize us psychologically, technically, tactically for a while. It's going to destabilize our system because our heart rate is staying higher for longer in plays. There's more phases, right? So I think looking at the body shape, you might see a little bit of a change there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kevin, there's loads of stuff in that now. I think players and coaches are going to take plenty from that, and there's a lot, I think, for everyone to digest heading into next season in terms of S&C. And as you said, it will take a while before we have a lot of data to analyse and we see how things actually affect how training transitions onto the pitch as well, and things like injuries and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's going to be, there's no set kind of way teams need to be doing things right now, but we're just going to have to wait and see, really. But I suppose the few key points that you laid out there, I think, are really good areas that we can focus on over the next while.
The one last thing I would say in terms of training, which is possibly something you've seen me talk about before, and I try to implement it as much as possible. Sometimes structures and training slots, let's say in a busy club, can affect this, but coaches should always think about 72 hours rest. Okay. So if we play on Saturday, right, in an ideal world, you might do a Monday or Tuesday session, which is a bit of conditioning, maybe a bit of gym work, whatever, and that your heavy training then would be on a Wednesday, right? And you might have a get-together on a Friday, which is more tactical. You know, you could do the warm-up, stuff like that. We can really only have... Off-season is fine, right? Off-season is fine to have maybe 3 or even 4 if you're building volume, right? That's fine if you're doing nothing else. But once we start playing games, 2 big events a week is max. Okay. And I think this is one of the things missing in pretty much all sports. And you can see the Premier League, for instance, as one example, struggling with this, you know, because they're playing 3 games on a cycle all the time now, right? They've got bigger squads and they've got better at resting players. That's clear. But, like, they know themselves, like I spoke to someone in Liverpool a few years ago, like, that they went through a period one Christmas where they hardly did any grass training whatsoever, right? Little blocks of 15 minutes because the games, they obviously would have good heart rate data, good HRV data, all that kind of stuff, and they just weren't recovering from the games, right? So 48 hours really is the absolute minimum to do something else, right? But 72, so going from Saturday to Tuesday or Wednesday, having that as your main session, and then rather than doing hard stuff Tuesday and Thursday, and that is the tradition, right? And even if you're watching it, right, like you can't go bananas on Tuesday because you're worried about being too fatigued for Thursday.
Yeah.
And what often happens, unfortunately, is they go bananas on both days, and they can't understand why a team is inconsistent or starting slow on Saturdays. You know?
Yeah, flat. Yeah.
Yeah, it's flat. Exactly. It's a cumulative thing. So that would be the big message in general. Nothing to do with these rules. Once the games start, think about the 72-hour rule, right? I think that could change everything for a lot of people. And then once the game starts anyway, you're not going to change much week to week. Like you're not going to get that amazingly better. Like so, a really good hit out proper hard session, allow 90 minutes, do some weights at the end of it if you want as well on a Wednesday night or something like that. For me, that's the ideal. Like play your hard games, play your constrained games, whatever. Do a bit of your running, whatever, right? And allow that recovery then to the Saturday as well or Sunday, whatever way it works out.
Yeah, because that's what you would probably see even from playing a bit of soccer to football. It's changed a little bit the last few years in terms of football, but there's less of a focus, say in soccer, you get your pre-season done and then you're not trying to add more fitness as the season once it's started. Whereas in football, a lot of teams, and hurling would be the same, where you're still trying to build on the fitness when the league has started. But from what you're saying there, it's counterproductive really, because there's too many high impact training or games across the week then.
Absolutely. And you see, part of that is cultural and the constraints of how we rate the competitions. I would love if we were a little bit more league based. I think the championship in ways. Now, we love the championship in other ways. So don't get me wrong. I think you need big games that are knockout, right? But it constrains us tactically and everything. And in terms of adventure as a coach, like we don't have the volume of games to try stuff, because if you lose 2 games in Gaelic games, your season is probably done. You're probably trying to stay out of a relegation final. Do you know what I mean? That's the way the club is now. It's so cutthroat, right? So then in your league, you have to use your league that way. And training through the league, I just tearing my hair out even when I see coaches announce that. I'm like, this is madness. Why are you doing this to the players? They don't need it, And freshness is key. Freshness is everything. You want your full squad. I don't think there's any excuse bar accidents, right? And contact injuries. That's fine. They happen. But there is no excuse for a team not to reach championship with their full squad fresh.
Yeah, 100%. Kevin, it's been fascinating there getting your insight into that. We might have a catch up this time next year and have a look back and see what we've learned and maybe what things developed that we weren't expecting. But thanks very much for coming on today. As I said, I think people will get loads from this conversation. So really appreciate your time.
No problem, Kevin. I appreciate you asking me on.